I have to put them on there after I get them.
Have a seat. Have a seat. What I understand, anybody can sit there. We had an opportunity we gave early. We didn't want to do it. Stephanie. Go get your seat, put your stuff in, and then come back and talk to me.
Well, I'll take it back. Did you ever find that proposal?
It's so sad.
I had no more power than you do.
Yeah, all Edie had to do was, the request was to change the syllabus, which she did. And then she said she sent it back. So something else too.
I didn't call you back.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we should go ahead and begin. Try to start here
That's what she
as much on time as we can. Again, thank you for coming out on a Friday at 3 o'clock. Friday before the gala. That may not mean something to some of you, but to me it means a lot because it's a busy time in our household schedule. Well, we've gone through 6, and there's chairs here. Just pull them back. There's nothing sacrosanct about being down here. So people come in, let them use those chairs. Gosh, it's hard to believe we're at the 7th of these. When I first saw them when we started in February, I thought, my Lord, that's a long way off, but here we are, almost at the end of the semester and at the end of the formal symposium. I'll have a little bit to say after the program, before we get into the question period. I think we're very fortunate today because we have folks who are our own, who work in the College of Education. I think, all from the College of Education. We're really here to learn from them. They all have different topics that they are going to try to explain to bring everybody up to speed. It pleases me that we have faculty here who are not in the College of Education. And for those of you who are on the College of Education, maybe some of this will be things that you already know, but remember, some of your colleagues don't teach in your college, and therefore this may be new information to them. Now, I don't know who's starting today. Okay, Karen, you're going to start. So you tell what you're going to talk about, you introduce yourself, and so because some folks, believe it or not, may not know you.
This whole half of the room, there's half of my faculty already. I'm Kathy Barlow, Chair of the Department of Elementary Reading and Special Education. And I was asked to talk a little bit about what is, because we found out some of the things not everybody was up to speed on when we heard some of the information. So I'm going to be talking about some of the things that are going on in the department, and then a little bit about a little bit of vision that we might like to talk about. So Tim's going to operate PowerPoint. I couldn't stand being in this room and somebody not using this equipment, so I had to do it.
You all may want to, you can't see it, but that's okay if you obviously you know you can't see it, but there's 3 chairs down here. There's 3 chairs down here, and you can watch from down here and then go back up there behind us. Okay. Like in class, isn't it? Just like in class?
Or church.
Or church.
Okay, a little bit about where we are. Just going to kind of break it a little bit between the undergraduate and graduate programs. Talking a little bit about, and I know I'm not going to hit everything, so please understand that. I'm just hitting some of the things that are going on. One of the things that we do have is we have professional development schools. We do have them going. We have an active one in Ashland. That's a consortium between a couple of school districts. We laid the groundwork to begin work in Pikeville on another one, and we have several more in the offing. So when you hear people talk about professional development schools, we do have those going. Another thing, team teaching, we do that both by example We have some model people that teach in teams of 4 and teams of 2, so we can model the things that we talk about that our students are supposed to know with Kara. And we require students to do that because that's more and more a requirement out in the schools when they are employed. We have a multiplicity of field experiences. I heard that several times, and we start from observation, things like going to site-based councils and board meetings for observation, all the way up to full class teaching before they ever get into student teaching. So some of that's going on. We have a teacher in residence program that we started 2 years ago, where we hire a teacher from the public schools who's considered to be outstanding, and we bring them in to work with us for a minimum of 1 year, maximum of 2. And that person always rotates, will be rotating out to give us professional development. We have collaborative planning and teaching. Like I said, we have a block program where we have 4 faculty teach. If our faculty teach in our intro class, we all do planning so the students can see us doing that. We have progressive portfolios that start in our very first courses and continue on until their senior professional semester. We have technology in most of our courses. We now have a new state technology standard. It's not even a choice anymore. And we've got to develop a whole matrices to figure out how we're putting all of that in our courses now. We have a continuous assessment that we model that we have to follow from the beginning courses all the way to our end product, which are our student teachers, and we have a plan for that. Both departmentally and college-wide, we have a plan for that. Matter of fact, yesterday I was at a meeting at KACTE, and several of the universities were presenting their assessment, and the CPE members were there and were shocked. They didn't know that all of that was going on in the departments of education. We also have increased student teaching. I heard that mentioned. In elementary, and I'm only talking about elementary now. In elementary, we have 1 week of orientation, and then our students go out. We don't have, that they're on campus taking classes and then go out anymore. We also have, and hope to move to this a little more, some of our students are in a block program in the fall semester and are with those very same teachers in the spring. They have the methods and then they have their student teaching, which converts basically into almost 1 full year of student teaching. We also have remodeled lots of programs. Our moderate severe disability is one of those, and it's been completely revised. And we've done that to many of the courses, a lot of times because of the gen ed, but a lot of times because of changes that have happened in the field. All right, we do international research, partnerships, exchanges. We have those going on with Russia, with England, with the United States, doing research to find out what works, what's not working, what motivates kids. Our evaluations, we have done research in our department with students that are out in their internship, and for those of you that are not education, they do a full internship after they graduate, and we have followed up our students to see what things were good and what things we needed to work on when they're out there. And one of the things that we found out was that the discipline and management course that we had, they felt like they weren't adequately prepared. That had previously been in a 4-week class prior to student teaching, and because of that information, we closed the loop and we brought it back, and we now have a full semester of that course so we can give them. Okay, graduate programs, we revised most of the programs there. Our master's program now has an action research component at the exit end of the master's program, where our students will be doing a 6-hour action research. We hear that they want things that they can take back and do in the schools, and what they'll be doing is they'll be taking something they want to find out about in their teaching and be doing research on that and how to find out how to improve that to a greater extent. Again, at the master's level, we have technology incorporated in many of the classes and offer classes by DL and internet. Approximately 30% of our faculty deliver courses via distance learning or internet. One of the reasons I say that is because that's one of the concerns. You don't bring things to us, and we found out that time with that made a big difference because we start offering as many courses as we could right after school, like the 4:15 time, so the teacher could walk down to the other end of the building and take the class and then go on home. We can't do that with all of them, but that helps with some of it. We've modified many of the graduate certification programs. That's those students that have gotten a degree somewhere else and want to come back and do something in teacher ed. And if I've seen an increase in anything, which shocks me, we have many students who are in other areas of work and come back to pick up a teaching certificate. Okay. This is just things that I've heard about and things that I'd just like to throw on the table as we go forth and plan. You know, we're not at the planning stage yet. We're just at evolving to see what we want to do. So these are some things we might think about. One of the things is we hear about accreditation all the time, and we do this mass preparedness a year to 18 months before they come. And that really ought to start as soon as the visit concludes. If we do ongoing assessment and reevaluate our courses and do that in our programs, then we should be doing a marathon before a visit. And that helps us too, because we need to keep doing that ongoing assessment. That we have a seamless curriculum, P16. I'm going to I mentioned it later, but let me go ahead and mention it here. I think it'd really be neat to have liaison teams, public school person and a higher ed person assigned to a district to help us work on the transition from the high school to here. Also at the other end, I think that would be really good to do that from that end to the workplace. That's going to take a lot of time and effort, and I don't know what all that will involve, but this is the dream, not a teacher preparation and renewal centers. I really have a hard time with the term professional development centers because they have gotten abused and used so much. And I thought maybe we need to look at something a little different so we can kind of focus. We need to have centers where we prepare teachers and also where teachers can come back to be renewed. And I think we need to look at it that way and in packages. Maybe even some team teaching with the content area people. You know, everybody talks about, everybody wants to stay in the little box of the hours and everything, but maybe we can combine some things by doing some teaming across the content area and collapse courses and work together, heaven forbid. Visits to all systems, you know, I think that we need to be out there and find out concerns and everything, and we may find out a whole different picture because we've not had a lot of representation here from our colleagues that are in the schools right now. Another concern that we've had over the years has to do with transfer students, and to make sure that what they have is the same as our students here so that they're not starting off behind. And I think maybe we need to do some assessment at that point when a transfer student comes in and make sure. Then I think we also need different assessment points throughout to make sure that the product that we're preparing is on track. A cadre of experts, higher ed and public school. Another thing, you know, we hear about is that we're out of it, we're way behind. Well, one way that we can maybe change some of that is to match a public school person and a higher ed person in areas of expertise, and let's go out and do. And if we need to learn a little bit, we will. If they do, they will. And we'll go out in teams of two, which will be a learning and dissemination time. Develop packages. I think we've got to look at that maybe a little more than courses, because we need to find out what the needs are. We need to look at their consolidated plans in the school system, our strategic plan, and start meeting those needs as opposed to looking mainly at courses. I mentioned the liaison teams earlier. Build into program stretch and search. That's just the Barlow little saying there. I just really think that we need to keep, move the mark all the time, move the mark, and whatever that entails, and think beyond the, if I were an artist, I'd tell you to think beyond the boundaries of the page, go way beyond that. And sometimes I think we get caught. I think we need to link with businesses. I was just in a meeting yesterday, and there's a company that's working in our region right now, National School Conference Institute, that's going to be setting up all of these things that we've talked about if we don't. They're going to be providing those services for schools and contracting directly with schools. So if we don't buy into this picture, I'm afraid we're going to be behind the 8 ball. The other thing is I think we need to market. In education, we've not had the business mode, and I think we need to get into that. I think we need to tie up with the business area and get some marketing skills and get out there and tell about what we do. We're not real good about that. So we need to get out there and do that. We need to gather the investors. You can call them stakeholders, you can call them players, whatever you want, but I like the term investors. And the reason I like the term investors is because when you invest, that means you put something in to get something out. And I think that that's the mindset that we need to have now. And I've mentioned get out of the black box. By gum, we are unique, but we need to be more unique. We need to find our market and go for it. I saw on a bulletin board in our building that the students had prepared. Our InCate and conceptual framework model was teachers as educators as architects. And the students said we need to build bridges. And I thought, what a wonderful example and a terrific way to end is that we need to be building those bridges. And I think it's an exciting time in education now. And it'll be just as exciting as we want to make it. So that's the dream.
Thank you.
I'm Debbie Grubb with the Department of Leadership and Secondary Education.
We have chairs up here. I'm sorry, Debbie.
That's okay.
We have chairs up here, folks, if you all want to sit. If there's an empty seat, you can sit. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Some of them are going to come.
As I said, I'm Debbie Grubb with the Department of Leadership and Secondary Education, and I have a split assignment in educational psychology, counseling, and educational leadership. When we get to the point where you're asking questions, if it's questions specifically related to the undergraduate secondary education programs, then I will defer on answering those questions to the people who are here who are the real experts because they work with those programs on a daily basis, of Dr. Pullen, Dr. Lennox, Dr. Fasco, and maybe some of the other people in our department too that I don't see right now. The information I've done two different things. First is just a very basic overview of what we do in the Leadership and Secondary Education Department. The second thing that I'll talk about is information that I've received from superintendents and principals and other administrators in our region and across the state of just some words that they would like to give to us as we start on this quest of what we want to do to upgrade teacher education. Some words of wisdom that they have for us, of directions that they would like to see us go, and things that they would like to make sure that we don't forget about. Secondary education program. For one thing, people don't major in, as an undergraduate student, they don't major in secondary education. They major in a content area like math or science or English or whatever. And then we provide the professional education courses for them that allow them to be certified by the Kentucky Department of Education. So it's a little bit of misinformation when someone comes to our department and says that they want to major in secondary education. They can't do that as an undergraduate. They major in a content area, and then we provide those courses, the professional education courses, which allow them the certification. What we have on the screen are the areas that we currently, at Morehead State University, provide the professional education courses for these content areas in your departments. I see representatives from almost every department, I guess. And this is what the Kentucky Department of Education will use to certify a student once they've majored in one of these areas and taken the professional ed courses in our department. At the graduate level, our department has 3 programs that are pertinent to this discussion today. We have counseling as a master's degree program and a rank 1 program, and it predominantly 99% of the students who are in that program are wanting to become guidance counselors in the schools. We do have a small proportion of students who want to be mental health counselors, but most of our counselors want to work in the public schools. We also have master's and rank 1 programs in secondary education, and that's always a joint program between our department and a content area. A person will have 2 advisors. They will have me as an advisor in secondary education They would have Stephanie as an advisor in art if that's their content area. So again, we would have, we're providing the professional education courses which support their continued development of expertise in a content area if they get their master's or rank 1 in secondary ed. And the third of the graduate programs that we support is the program in educational leadership, which provides certification in principalship, supervision, superintendency, all of the leadership positions in the schools, in the public schools. And we've done some really interesting things just very recently, just started this year. We now have a P through 12 principalship program, certification program. We've done this in conjunction with Eastern, Northern, and the University of Kentucky. It used to be that a person would get their master's degree in science, for example, in secondary education, and then they would want to become a principal, and they would get their principal certification post-master's degree. Now they will be able to go into a master's degree program and get their principalship certification without first going into a content area and getting their master's degree in that. We have mixed feelings about this. This is an initiative that really came from the State Department of Education. It is a mandate that we're trying to meet along with the other universities. There is a shortage of principals. There's a shortage that superintendents were becoming very concerned about, and they felt that this would increase the number of people who might be able to get into the market as a principal much sooner than if they had to go through a separate master's degree first and then go through the certificationship in administration. So, you know, we have concerns about it. We're not positive it's going to be the best thing for public schools. It might be that there's a real benefit to getting a master's degree and teaching longer in the field of science before you become an administrator. But this is trying to meet the needs of the public schools. They need more principals, and so this will allow that process to take place quicker. We also have a superintendency certification revised, and we're doing that in conjunction with UK. Just in the last couple of years, we've had a lot of very collaborative efforts with the people in educational administration at Northern, Eastern, and the University of Kentucky with Morehead State University. And I think that it has strengthened all the programs. I think that we're not a follower. We are definitely a collaborator, and I think that we are viewed as a valuable collaborator in these efforts. And last, just information about our department is the sequence of undergraduate courses. All students who want to go into the teacher education program, before they even apply for the teacher education program, and these are the courses that are in our department. It doesn't include the EDF 207 class, which is taught through the elementary reading and special ed department. But the first course in our series is the EDF 211 class, which is human growth and development. Everyone who is going to be a teacher at any level takes this course before they apply to get into the teacher education program. And right now that course is a half semester course. One of the initiatives that we have is to change that to a full semester so that students will be able to get all of the, and really have time to digest all of the information, the heavy content that is in that particular course, and we think that that'll be a very positive change. Then EDF 311 is Learning Theories for Teachers. All people who are going to be certified in any of those secondary ed majors that I put on the screen before will take the Learning Theories for Teachers class. EDSE 312 is Teaching Skills in Media. We're changing that to Educational Methods and Technology, which is just showing the new direction. It's not going to be spending so much time on mimeograph machines. It's going to be spending time on computers. And I'd like to thank Lisa Lennox, who has taken a major effort here to bring this particular course into the 21st century. She has already been doing this. She's already made the initiatives, but now we're having a name change of the course to reflect what she's actually been doing in there. All of the people who are getting any kind of secondary certification take that course also. Then we have the EDSE 333 Field Experiences class. All students in secondary ed except music and HPER take this course. It is an opportunity for students to get out in the field and see what's going on. It's not, though, just an observation class. It is an opportunity for teachers, for people who are going to become teachers, to get into the classrooms and to start doing something. They tutor students on a one-to-one basis. They have an opportunity to do pre-service teaching, and they also have an opportunity to get involved in whatever's going on in that classroom at the time. For example, if portfolios are being developed, then they can help students with their portfolio entries. They can conference with students on their writing. They can help score the portfolios if that's what's happening in the class at that time. So it's some very meaningful experiences for them. EDSE 499 416 are both the student teaching components. 499C is teachers in today's schools, and that's the 2-week seminar that is prior to the students going out into the schools during their student teaching semester. This used to be a 4-week course. We've shortened it to 2 weeks because we have had complaints that teachers, the prospective teachers, are spending too much time at the university and not enough time out in the schools. And so we've shortened that to a minimum of 2 weeks, and then get the students out into the schools so that they have almost the whole semester actually in the schools. This is the capstone course. If we have last-minute information that needs to be disseminated to the students, and if we have last-minute assessment information that we want to obtain from the students, this is the course that provides the opportunity to be able to do that. The 416 is actually the student teaching course, and again, the students are out in the schools all but the first 2 weeks. I don't have this on the overhead, but we also are in the talking stages of developing a professional development school. Dr. Pullen is working with that. She is talking to mostly people in Pikeville, both the Pikeville Independent Schools and also the Pike County school system. And we do think that we're going to be moving in that direction. We have high hopes that something will work out there, and she's working with that initiative. Okay, that's what our department is like. The other thing that I wanted to talk quickly about today is information that I was following Wayne's lead. Wayne was getting information from the university. If you wanted to make an improvement in the education program, what would you do? And I think that it was a very general question that he posed. And if you've been on the email recipient list where you've been receiving all of this crossfire that's been going back and forth, it's been really fascinating and very informative to see all of the different opinions that people have, and a lot of the things that Kathy mentioned that are dreams that she has are dreams of other people at this university too, and that's become very obvious. One of the things that I wanted to do was to not just limit our dreams to the dreams that we have here at the university. And I've been in the very lucky position of having been in the public schools for 15 years before I came to the university, and I knew how to get information from the State Department. And one way to do that is to sign yourself up to be on listservs. And when I came to the university, I found that it was very difficult to get information from the Kentucky Department of Education. The information that goes to the schools I couldn't get. So I signed myself up on the superintendent's listserv. No one kicked me off. I found out that there's a word for me. I'm a lurker. I guess it's like a voyeur. Yes, it's very much like a voyeur. And the person that told me this, it was a very derogatory term, and he let me know that it was a very derogatory term because I just sat back and watched all the information that was going back and forth. But I finally participated. I finally put something out there on the listserv. I asked the superintendents on the listserv what they would do, that we were in this project of wanting to improve our education program, and what words of wisdom would they give us. And I did get a lot of responses, and the other people that I sent the same question to were members of the Kentucky Leadership Academy that Wayne and I have been lucky enough to be able to attend for the last 2 years. It's been a wonderful opportunity for us to learn and for us to I don't know how to say this and not be mean to the other universities, but we were the only university who sent someone, and I had a lot of people at the Kentucky leadership meetings who felt that it was nice that we didn't think that we were too good or too smart to come and sit beside them and learn with them. And they felt that that was that was to Moorhead's credit. So we had an opportunity to get to know a lot of the principals, supervisors, and even superintendents in our region through the Kentucky Leadership Academy. So I got the email address of all of those people and sent the same question to them. And what you have on the screen now are responses from both of those, from the listserv of the superintendents and from the KLA email. Their words of wisdom to us are to accept only the brightest candidates. They don't want second-rate students in their to become teachers and come to their school for a job, and so they think that we shouldn't accept second-rate students into our program, that we should emphasize instructional technology, that we should also emphasize multiple intelligences. These are not in any particular order. These are just the order that I happen to download them in. That we definitely, there's a shortage of science and math teachers, and so we need to do more in recruiting into the areas of science and math in education, that we need to help the students realize that there are jobs out there waiting for them and that this would be a good field for them. We need to prepare teachers who are proficient in the things that they're trying to do in the schools right now. I don't know how many superintendents and principals I heard say, I just get really sick of you putting out someone who's certified and then me having to send them to lots of different professional development to get them to understand where we are and to be able to do the things that we want them to be able to walk into school and be able to do the first day of class, like understanding brain research, understanding the connection between brain research education and learning theories, understanding unit and lesson design, thinking skills, learning styles, all of these different things, writing skills, writing portfolios, writing across the curriculum, all of those as initiatives. They want the students to know how to do those things when they come out as teachers. They don't want to have to prepare them after we're finished with them. More training on the development of good lesson plans, specifically lesson plans that go along with Kentucky's core content. They don't want us teaching lesson plans out of some textbook that doesn't have anything to do with Kentucky. They want their teachers prepared to be teachers in Kentucky. And you'll have to realize that these are all Kentucky administrators, of course, that gave me feedback. More hands-on teaching experience. Teach the students to develop good open response questions. This is, of course, in response to the assessment. It used to be the CURIS assessment, now the CATS assessment. Make certain people are competent in their subject areas. I thought this was good, that a person who can't teach algebra shouldn't be a math teacher, period. There's no place for them in the high schools. There's also no place for them in the middle schools, according to this superintendent. All teachers need writing skills. If they can't write, teach them to do it. If they can't learn how to do it, then don't certify them. 85%, approximately 85% of the old CURIS assessment and approximately 85% of the new CATS assessment is based on writing skills. Every single teacher needs to know how to encourage writing skills. If they can't do it, then their students are not going to be able to perform and the school is going to be in trouble. So everyone has to understand that. And this last one, if we could do this, it would just be magical. Teach a work ethic. They want people to come to them who are professionals. They don't want someone who wants to work for them because they get summers off or who wants to be on the same schedule as their kids. They want someone who wants to be there because they're a professional. And that's basically the summary of what I found out when I asked this question.
Get some chairs so you can sit. It makes me nervous. We don't want to make you nervous. Well, let's find some chairs. This was a big building. A lot of chairs around. Notice how they just hop? Would you like to just...
That's good.
Okay, Vice
That's
President,
good.
let's go get some chairs. Who's next? Who's next? Who's next? Who's next? Go. Oh, Nancy. Oh, there you are. Well, we're good. Does she need to, wait a minute, Nancy. Does she need to be up here?
She's fine. I can get.
You okay? We're worried about the camera. We got to make sure that you.
Are we on camera?
Yes. Yes. You're on tape too.
Well, it's not that I don't understand this technology, it's just that I didn't realize I would be using it in here today. So I have paper copy, but I don't have a lot of it, but I'd like to just pass it around so you can maybe share with people.
You can put it on screen.
Okay, it's awful small print, but we'll do the best we can. That might help. I did bring paper copy in case folks want to also look at that. My charge was to try to get some feedback about teacher education from faculty in the arts and sciences. And I thought, well, I wonder how come I got chosen for this job. It was a pretty tall order, and I think that a lot of people, when I queried on email about it, it was a little confusing. And I think it's because we're all trying to figure out exactly what does it mean to both teach in our content area and prepare future teachers. So I just made some notes based on feedback that I received from faculty, and I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because Rob Lockhart is also in the English department. He's the English education person, and is going to talk just briefly about his perceptions of these issues, at least in our discipline, as an example or an exemplar. There was, as on Wayne's list, there's been quite a bit of discussion about conflicts and tensions between methods and content. The perception it seems to me, among a lot of faculty in content areas, so to speak, it's not like education doesn't have content, but is that it's mostly about content coverage, that potential teachers need to have enough knowledge in content to teach it, and there's a perception that perhaps they don't. People gave me lots of really good examples. One that comes to mind is this whole area of concentration programming that we're working in right now, where students, that we're compressing programs. Sciences, for example, here, a person in the science department told me that, for example, there are 3 areas of competence that are required for secondary science teaching, which means compressing chemistry, physics, earth sciences, and they said plus astronomy into 1 degree program. And this is a problem primarily because it means that students are not necessarily experts in any one area, but must still teach it if they are. And one of the things we found, at least in my own department, is that while students may be okay in their primary subject area, they've got these other areas that they may in fact be expected to teach in, but they get C's and D's in those courses. So and they've only taken a couple of them, so we wonder, are they ready to teach journalism if they're not passing journalism courses in any kind of rigorous fashion? Another issue that came up was how well are faculty modeling the instructional practices that are relevant out in the schools right now, so that students are seeing some of the kind of interactive teaching taking place also in the classroom that they're learning their content from. So a kind of marriage of content and method. I'd like to thank Dora Amati for this nice little phrase. She talked about mathematics especially, and she said maybe what we need are academic wellness centers within each of our own programs so that we can diagnose students early in terms of lacks and do something about it quickly, which would mean following up on something that someone else also mentioned, that we ought to give students opportunities. This is down at the bottom of the page, but it's related to this. I'm trying to help my video man here do this well. One of the last bulleted comments was that we need to give students opportunities to experience what it really is going to mean to be a teacher earlier in their career so they can get out if they want to and if they need to. If they're failing and we know that they're not going to be able to pass programs or be good teachers, we need to provide them with opportunities to discover that earlier rather than later. And this academic wellness center might be one of those places where we make that diagnosis. The patient is terminally ill. So I don't know. There was a comment that someone made about this disparity between the kind of grading systems that people have in different colleges. I wasn't really sure what this means, but I think that it might be that, is it possible to have any shared standards across disciplines in on certain kinds of issues, like, for example, writing or computational expectations, etc., technology usage, whatever. Some people mentioned that they found that some future teachers in their classrooms seem to be avoiding content areas that they'll have to teach. This is especially relevant for elementary and some middle school programs where you're going to have to do some more inclusive teaching and you're not just departmentalized. But they avoid those classes because they're intimidated and uncomfortable with it. For example, the elementary school student teacher who avoids science or math because they don't feel comfortable with it. They really want to do language arts or they want to do music or whatever. That's a problem and it doesn't make the problem go away. So that we have to think about how we design programs to help, again, students identify that those are going to be very real requirements of their teaching lives and to make some decisions earlier on about whether or not they should continue. And the second to last bullet I thought was really interesting. One individual suggests that we need to have some kinds of real tests that can give students the opportunity to discover if they really can make it through the TEP and as a teacher when they finish. That is, students need to discover much earlier in their programs if they should drop out and find something else to study. It goes along with the idea of only recruiting the best. Right now, it seems that students go into teaching as something to fall back on after they've discovered they're not good at marketing or music or social work, rather than as something that is an intellectual and professional challenge for which they must truly prepare themselves. I have lots of advisees, more than I like to admit, who tell me that they decided they want to be an English teacher because they couldn't do X or they couldn't do Y. And I thought, oh, okay, welcome to English. And I handwrote a last comment here, because I don't want to forget this particular one too, and this just came in the other day. There were concerns from people in art, physical education, and music that these are areas that are often being eliminated in lots of school programs, despite the fact that there's accountability and assessment in those areas. And the question was, how do we prepare ourselves and our students for that kind of, it seems to be a fiscal reality in a lot of schools, that they're trying to get through other kinds of assessments or fund other kinds of programs, so they're eliminating arts and physical education, even though there's an accountability and assessment that goes along with that in every school. So how do those programs prepare for those realities, that their students will go through certification and they may not actually be able to find jobs because those programs aren't considered priorities? So that's kind of a quick summary of this, and I'm just going to give Rob an opportunity to.
I'm Rob Lockhart, and I teach English 500, which is, and again, all the content areas, of course, have a similar course. This happens near the end of their preparation program. And although I'm finding that some of my students are going to do their student teaching the very next semester, but there are a couple or a few who will be doing it a couple of semesters down the road. I have both undergraduate and graduate students in there. This semester I only have undergraduate. But their vital concern is, at this point, which is not unusual, is being prepared to teach. Most of them feel that they're just not prepared to teach. And so I see one of my primary goals or tasks is to convince them that they know a lot more than they think they know, that they have been very well prepared in their education courses with the content and the theory, the philosophy, the psychology, all those kinds of things. They've been very well prepared in their content area, which is in our program really covers three basic areas: writing, language, and literature. And so what I try to do is to somehow allow them to overcome that fear or agony or anxiety that they're not prepared to teach, because I think I've been very impressed with the two groups that I've worked with so far in their knowledge of methods, philosophy, psychology, as well as the content area. Another issue that I concern myself with is the actual content of my course. Where I've come from, they actually complete in the content area 3 courses, and I haven't quite overcome this in my classes yet. But I'm basically trying to do 3 courses in one. I'm trying to do actually 4 courses when I stop and think about it. Methods of teaching writing, and methods of teaching literature, and then a methods or something is dealing with language. I don't think we teach language necessarily, but we try to deal with language issues, and then we talk about literature and writing, but then also a more general English methods type of concern that deals with concerns of an English teacher that aren't necessarily consistent with other content areas in the schools. We also talk about professional issues of organizations and conferences, trying to read as much as possible and stay active in current research, those kinds of things. And so I try to do all that kind of stuff. And then, not necessarily in this order, the third primary concern, but what inevitably becomes the primary focus of the class is CARA, and both with the portfolio, but just in little things like, not really a little thing, but how do I respond to student writing? And of course, there's the whole debate about ethical response to student writing, what they can ethically do and what they ethically cannot do, and encouraging other content area teachers to write in those classes for the portfolio and those kind of things. And so we spend a lot of time with the KDE website. Thank goodness for the website. And specifically the online publication transformations, where I think they do a really nice job of kind of going through the knowledge that an English teacher might need to perform under CARA standards. And so we spend a lot of time with CARA, and they do instructional unit, an instructional unit, and other small things like that to become accustomed to the terminology of CARA, the objectives and goals of CARA, as well as NCTIRA standards and those kind of things. And so I am concerned as an English 500 teacher that this is the only class that I really have to work with them, because I feel like there's a lot to cover. We do have the content method debate issue, whatever, in our department as well as the other departments, and they take a number of courses in the content area, but I don't see those courses as being necessarily pedagogical in their concern, and so I'm trying to find a way to bridge the content that they're getting there and the pedagogies and needs that they're going to have to address when they become a teacher in the schools. I don't know what else I need to say.
I think that's fine.
Okay, I think that's it.
All right, thank you.
I'm Wayne Willis, and I'm turning my back on Kathy. I don't know if that's a good thing to do. Department of Elementary and Reading and Special Education, and my area is the history and philosophy of education. Shortly after the symposia started, I sent out a piece of email to everybody who was on a list that I had who was considered teacher educators for NCATE purposes, saying, what do you think we need to do to reform teacher education? And I just took all the responses that I got, piled them all in a pile, and there were 99. And I've sent those back out. Many of you have seen those, and there are copies available if anybody wants to see them. Is Edna's thing in here somewhere?
Yes.
Edna went through those and tried to sift out some major themes, and so you've got that in front of you. And I'm going to talk about three in particular. And at our last college meeting, my wife suggested that if I were given the floor, the meeting might go long. And so I'm going to try to stick with my formal notes here and try to put some of these issues into a larger context in terms of American culture and in terms of university life. 100 years ago, William Rainey Harper, founding president of the University of Chicago, argued that only 10% of those high school graduates who enrolled at the university were fitted for legitimate university work. He recognized, however, that there was a growing demand for post-secondary education, and he proposed dramatic changes in higher education to meet that demand, proposals that I think still merit our attention. By the 1940s, 11% of American high school graduates were actually enrolling in college, and Harvard President James Conant argued that 11% was a far larger portion than we could reasonably expect to meet university standards. His solution was to develop a standardized admissions test and simply turn away all but the most gifted students. Despite the concerns of leaders like Harper and Conant, higher education has since opened its doors to millions of high school students from the lower 90%, indeed sometimes from the lower 50%. Graduates with transcripts full of B's and C's and even D's. One might well wonder if high schools are so much more demanding today than they were then, so that now even C and D students are prepared for university-level work. Data collected and analyzed by Lawrence Steinberg and others suggests the opposite. High school standards are not higher now, but lower. That today's C students know less than their American counterparts 40 years ago, and less than their counterparts today in the rest of the industrialized world. More students who know less are applying for and being admitted to universities. Steinberg argues that the problem is not that today's students are less mentally capable than their counterparts, nor is it that their high schools are necessarily less competent at what they do. Rather, due to changes in the culture at large, students who enroll at the universities value academic learning less and are less willing to work hard than their historical and international counterparts. I mention this bit of educational history because I think it underlies a number of the issues that have been raised in these symposia and in faculty discussions of teacher education reform this semester. One is a curriculum issue that grows out of our concern about teachers who seem to know too little about the subjects they are assigned to teach. I would note that the perception of the content-ignorant teacher may not be entirely accurate. Studies in Virginia more than a decade ago and more recent reports by the Southern Regional Education Board suggest that ignorance of pedagogy is often as big or bigger a problem than ignorance of subject matter. It may not be as simple as adding a few content courses. I do agree, however, with speakers and colleagues who are distressed by students' sometimes appalling ignorance of the subjects they aspire to teach. And I wholeheartedly endorse the idea that we must do something to make sure they get better training in the academic disciplines. I also agree with colleagues in psychological disciplines who believe many of our students are woefully ignorant of a rapidly growing body of scientific literature about how young people learn and grow. And I agree with methods faculty and supervisors of student teachers who are frustrated by how little some of our students seem to know about how to enable another human being to learn. I agree with all three groups because I believe that many of our students know too darn little about everything. A couple of years ago, I enrolled in a sophomore level art history class where the instructor, a wonderful teacher, began by showing us a map of the world and identifying the continents and other major landmarks. Perhaps he saw the distress on my face because he stopped his presentation to apologize for the remedial nature of his instruction. But he said he knew from experience that there were probably a number of us in the room who did not know their continents. For our first quiz, in fact, he gave us 2 maps without labels and asked us to locate each of the landmarks listed at the top. The first was a world map on which we were to label all the continents. I'm convinced it could have been passed by many a 5-year-old at Moorhead Montessori. The second map included Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, but included nothing I would expect any middle schooler not to know. Was it possible that there are college students who don't know this stuff, I wondered? Later, the instructor removed a student's name from his or her paper and showed it to me. The Aegean Sea was labeled England. The Nile River was correctly labeled, but the sea into which it flowed was called Turkey. The central part of the Mediterranean Sea was labeled Iran, and the western part of the sea was called France. Saudi Arabia was labeled Mediterranean Sea. This ill-informed student was not a 5th grader, but a college junior majoring in psychology. I would like to think that such examples are extremely rare, but I fear they are not rare enough. Roughly 10% of the Kentucky high school graduates in my Foundations of Education course can't identify the current governor of Kentucky on a multiple choice test. I don't think that example reflects so much on us as it does on American culture at this moment in our history. After a recent Foundations exam in which the average score was a D, I talked to my students about study habits. One of the strongest students in the class told me that except at exam time, he probably studies about an hour a week. One student questioned whether it was reasonable to expect a college student to be mature enough to study new material outside of class. National data suggests that such attitudes are not limited to our students at MSU. 100 years ago, most students who enrolled at universities could already read Latin. Today, some of them can't find Italy on a map. Is it any wonder that they are not as far along as we would like them to be 4 years after they come here? These profound social changes do not, in my estimation, let us off the hook. In light of them, we may need to fundamentally change the curriculum, priorities and focus, perhaps even significantly change our mission. But I believe we should try very hard not to allow our frustrations to divide us. Let us not assume that if our students fail, it is because they are spending too much time studying something else. Perhaps they are spending simply too little time studying anything at all. All of this suggests to me that reform of teacher education must be much larger than curriculum changes in teacher education programs. We need an all-out crusade in American education, in higher education, and at Moorhead State in particular, to create an environment that nurtures a respect for and love of learning. We must not sit idly by while the mass media and pop culture pervade our world, our campus, even our students' dorm rooms, with messages convincing them that schooling is merely a means to money and that grades, diplomas, and credentials are more important than learning. In recent studies comparing educational achievement between Russia, England, and America, particularly Eastern Kentucky, it was found that the English and American schools were far ahead on technology and the Russians were far ahead on learning. Researchers attributed Russian achievement to a culture that sees learning as intrinsically valuable. That research seems to affirm the findings of Steinberg and others mentioned above, and my own assertion that for reforms to have any hope at all, they must pervade the whole university community. Like the folks of St. Petersburg, we must create an environment where literature and science and mathematics and drama and music and visual art are more pervasive than soap operas, Nike ads, and gossip TV. In defense of our students, let me add that the aforementioned generalizations about student ignorance don't apply to all of our students. Those of you on the faculty know that many of our students are among the best and brightest and most informed we might find anywhere in America or in the world. And for those students, we probably don't need to make a lot of major reforms beyond raising our expectations of them. Our problem is what to do about the others. If our current predicament is largely caused by cultural deflation in the value of learning, it is also a result of cultural inflation in the importance of college degrees. Many Americans now see a university education as a vocational training ground for almost everyone, no matter what their academic maturity. Why have universities allowed this to happen, particularly in light of Conant's not so unreasonable warnings? We might say that we could not stop this tide of public opinion if we had wanted to. But in truth, I think universities were often gleefully surfing it all the way to the bank. Funding of universities has often been based not upon how well you educate, but how many you enroll. If you perceive your funding to be inadequate, the only way to improve it is to recruit more students, convince those that come here to stay, allow to fail as few as possible. We are caught in the middle. On the one hand, we need to raise our standards, push students harder to get them to achieve more. On the other hand, we need to put the jam on the bottom shelf in order to accommodate the needs of the budget and the region. Dr. Davies told us a few weeks ago that it is a new ballgame in Kentucky, that funding is no longer enrollment driven. From a brief discussion of the issue with Mike Seelig, I get the impression that enrollment is no longer as big a variable as it once was, but it still impacts the budget. In any case, I think that in order to reform teacher education, we need to work through the issues of enrollment and funding as a community. Virtually every speaker we've heard in this series has told us we need to raise standards for admission to and completion of teacher education programs. None of them has addressed the impact upon our funding. I believe we need to develop a comprehensive philosophy of teacher education admissions that takes into consideration quality issues, size issues, and funding issues, and we need to communicate that philosophy to all our publics and enforce it consistently so that we all know where we stand. In addition to issues of curriculum and standards, many of our symposium presenters and faculty have discussed the need to increase connections between teacher education faculty and the public schools through professional development schools and the like, in order to help us stay more relevant to the real world of schooling and to help us maintain better quality controls over the field experiences our students have. We also hear in the schools and the press that we are not as responsive to the professional development needs of experienced teachers as they would like us to be. As a teacher educator, I wholeheartedly endorse the idea that we should be more involved out there. But to do so, I think the faculty and administration alike need to rethink our workload structure, our reward structure, and our support structure relative to such service. Last year, a homebound teacher in Inez, that's Martin County, called Melinda Willis, my colleague and spouse, to say that she was having great difficulty with one particular student and wondered if anyone here could give her some help. Melinda and Adele Moriarty took a day to drive out to Inez and work with this teacher, who seemed profoundly grateful. It is exactly the kind of support that I think the region wants and that we like to provide. But of course, for doing such, Adele and Melinda get no reduction in other assignments. They still have heavy committee loads, double the teaching loads of our colleagues at UK, and the same requirements of scholarship for PBSI, tenure, and promotion as faculty members who never set foot in a school. While they are out there, the work is piling up here. I would also add that the gasoline for that trip, like most school service activities, was paid for out of the faculty member's household budget. If such service is an important part of our mission, there must be reductions in the workload to accommodate it, budget to support it. Another example along the same line comes out of the art department. There are probably not many people on this campus who give more service to public schools than Steve Tyrone, working with high school students, engaging his university students in public school projects, and enriching the experiences of both. A few years back, I walked into the sculpture studio and saw students working on a life-size bronze tiger. Steve explained that the tiger was the mascot for a high school, and the plaster sculpture from which it was being created was made by an artist in that school's community. The high school art students would be coming to campus for a field trip to watch the pouring of the bronze. Our students would do the actual pouring, welding, and grinding. I thought it was a wonderful project, one that served the schools and MSU in a variety of wonderful ways, and one that would make great PR for the university. I marched straight across the campus to the publications office and excitedly told them about the project. I was told that they were already aware of the project and had sent out a news release to the particular community involved. I was further told that since the faculty member involved was not really the artist who produced the design, they had decided not to publicize it more widely. What that sounds like to me is this. If this had fit into the Scholarship Creative Productions category on Steve's Vita, it would have been celebrated. But since it's merely service, it doesn't merit that kind of attention. Steve, like most of the rest of us, doesn't do such work for attention or rewards. But the story does show how the culture of the university sometimes communicates to us, in subtle and not so subtle ways, the wrong message. I believe that institutionally we should make a decision about whether or not we have the resources and commitment to support such service to the schools. If we do not, we should simply convey that to the region. We could tell them that we are a teaching institution and we will provide their young people with the best education we can, but that we cannot do that and provide the consulting and/or service they want. We could politely suggest that they call the State Department of Education or perhaps the University of Kentucky. Or we could decide that such service is central to our mission and then give the faculty the time, resources, rewards, and affirmations that they need to do it. We should certainly not put faculty in a position where they feel that they will be penalized if sometimes they choose serving a school over writing a scholarly paper. In some cases, this may require changes in department FEPs. In other cases, changing the attitudes of deans who have sometimes allowed fourth merit share considerations to turn into little more than publication contests. In every case, it will require changes in attitudes of faculty on tenure and promotion committees. None of these issues can be resolved, I believe, by faculty alone or administration alone. We must work together, and most of us are anxious to do so. Some think that teacher educators are the great stumbling block to teacher education reform. But this semester's activities have shown that many of us are not only supportive, chomping at the bits. Even the most vigorous detractors of this process have indicated to me that their detraction was inspired not by opposition to reform, but by cynicism over whether the resources and leadership would ever be provided to make it happen. Such cynicism is disempowering to all of us. We do great things at this university. We have some terrific students, terrific faculty and staff, terrific administrators, and terrific programs. But we could be and should be better. In the face of the cultural changes going on around us, we must be. I believe that as a faculty, we must seize this moment, trusting that our leaders are acting in good faith, doing our part, and holding accountable those who don't follow through on their commitments. If we do so, the dawn of the next millennium could be the awakening of a bright new age for us, for our public schools, and most importantly, for the children we ultimately educate.
I'm glad your wife made you reduce it to writing. Which shows that women are much smarter than men. But as well
been in question in my
But
house.
I want to thank all of you who presented today, and especially these encouraging words at the end that Wayne has given. You know, when we started this process, golly, 8, 10, 12 weeks ago, whenever it was, I really had no perceived notion of what would happen near the end, which is really kind of the beginning. And while we're formally kind of getting to the end of presentations, we're really just kind of at the beginning of what we can do with all of this. I still have no preconceived notion of what can come, but I'm encouraged, especially by the last 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of what you said, Wayne, and really some of the things that others of you have said too. I also have been watching the email with great interest. I haven't been able to read every word, I have to admit that. But how healthy it is to disagree and to talk with one another about such important issues. I remember my years of my own training, and I had to do a lot of group counseling as part of clinical psychologist work. You know, I had to bring groups in. I remember that kind of the first stage of this is you bring a lot of folks together with similar types of issues facing them in life, and you got to let all those frustrations out, but you also then have to go to the next step of what can we start doing about it. And I've been reading a lot of the frustrations, and I've been sensing a lot of the frustrations that many of you have either come to me personally, have said, you've told me in formal situations, etc. I believe that we're sitting on a real intellectual gold mine, both in terms of professional development, professional feeling good about what we do, and also potentially financially of what it can mean to this institution, and also in service of what people provide in terms of whether it be more money, time, or what have you. And there's a lot of ways that that service comes forward. Now, the reason I say that is I've watched what has occurred and have listened carefully to every one of the speakers. I think that we have started something in the state that persons have kind of gone out on the limb to follow, and they need us. They really do need us. When I say us, they need Morehead State University and you. You read closely in the paper, there's now a P through 16 committee in this state. It is a fairly closed group at this point in time. It won't always be, but it is. But there are 2 people who are on that, Dr. Davies, Dr. Cody, both of whom have been watching this process very carefully. You know, when a president of a system and a commissioner of a larger system put their name on the line with expectations, they're going to look for allies. They need allies to help this concept come about. When one thinks about this P through 16, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't know a thing about P through 16 until I started reading the materials that Langenberger put forth. Been following Georgia with great interest and the problems they're having down there with it. But it took an issue of teaching the teachers in the 21st century, and it really broadened it out to an institutional issue. Not a college of education issue, but an institutional issue. Something that stuck in my mind, it may not have stuck in yours. I can't even tell you who said it at this point in time because all the speakers kind of run together, and I didn't take copious notes to go back and check the reference. But they said, you know, we teach a lot of methods, and just think if every teacher that a student was in front of or with in a learning process, if every one of them were great, you wouldn't need methods. The role models would be there, and which would make methods and maybe this insecurity of knowing the information, but how do I teach it? They would have had 30 mentors already. Well, here's something that I would like for you all to think about as a faculty as I come to that. I think if this faculty is willing to step up, and I don't mean just the academic, the College of Education faculty, because it affects everyone. If this institution is willing to explore, I mean, just intellectually interested in exploring and shaping what a P through 16 experience would be, there is no doubt in my mind that there would be adequate funds to do that and do it correctly. Funds that could be used possibly to undo some of the things that you have said, because I think much of what you said is true. People appreciate public service, but I have found this institution, even in our PBSI, not really showing the appreciation for it. We have gone to another model, which I'm not saying is bad, but it was an easier model. Just an easier model. So, as you think about your questions, and they're going to make an on-the-spot decision here of how to approach questions and answers. And I'm not making that. I have got these experts around me. We talked about this at lunch on Tuesday. If I got any signals from this faculty of saying, we are willing, and I'm not talking about the College of Education now, but I'm talking about psychologists and sociologists and English teachers and all the ones that face it, biology or what have you, we are willing to step forward and say, as a faculty, we're willing to look at ourselves and to look at this intellectual gap that exists between one system of education and the other system of education. K through 12, a gap. This is where the frustration comes in, and then post-secondary. It used to be that 10% could get through the gap, no problem. But let's face it, folks, we're never going to turn the clock back. We've got to deal with the other 60% or more that come forward. And how best to do that is, yes, for us to sit with our counterparts and try to make this a system of education that doesn't stop at 12 years, but continues on with the expectations of intellectualness that we all want to see. And the only way I know to do that, is to try to bring the systems together. When you show up at a meeting and they say, well, you're not too good for us, you know, or at least you don't perceive you're too good for us to come, that says a lot. The young woman who sat right here at this podium and talked about how she teaches science, my Lord, you should have celebrated that for you should have celebrated it forever, but all of you who taught her should have celebrated it continually. I would have no problem with that professional sitting with any of our PhDs or any of our most intellectually oriented faculty and talking about how we can help young people be engaged early on and see them move to higher education. So, as you talk and bring your questions forward to our panel today, one of the things that I will ask you to do is to go back and review this material on what P through 16 is. Realize that you can shape it, by the way. It doesn't have to follow what other states have done. And if this faculty is willing to do that, and one reason I asked John Will Stacy to come here today, is that I am willing and I am confident that we can start getting significant money here to help us plan and move forward and really become a model in this state. I think we can become the model in the state with the most high-risk students collectively than anywhere else in the Commonwealth. Citing opportunity. But I will not go forward without the faculty because you all want to make it work. And can I answer all the questions of what this all means? No, I cannot. I can't. But it's a willingness, someone over here said, a willingness to put ourselves forward to change what we're doing in some fundamental ways in which everyone prospers, and more importantly, the young people coming through prosper. And that will obviously affect us in terms of all the other issues of workloads, payloads, how we're evaluated, and all these other things which are just part of the deal when you get into it. So, you are going to make the call on how we're going to do, are we going to have to take, oh my gosh, I talked too long.
I think we were going to take a 5-minute break or 10-minute break in between,
And then
come back.
questions
and
as a whole.
And then we will have a little intro into questions as a whole, yes.
Okay, well, we got 5 minutes for whatever you need, and we will start promptly when that little hand, or the middle hand gets on.
The long hands on really good.
Thank all of you presenters, great job.
A hand on the floor. Adele. If I did or not. I wasn't sure. I read it several times. I have a lot to say, and I've got it to ask Kathy.
I know.
Well, what you said here is part of it.
Right. Well, incongruence. The opposite, incongruence. I just thought I'd seen that somewhere before, and I couldn't say. Well, see, we never. Well, on the fourth floor,
a host of possible
close
reasons
together,
for
and
that.
we're so observant of our
But it
habits.
concerns us.
I know.
That teaching theory and a lot of the methodology.
To use their talent. So I think my suggestion is go with one year. I didn't.
Not very meaningful until you've
But I'll say
actually been
that
out there and given it a try.
Because it doesn't do that.
Be like,
On the back, so they might be gone by the time you get here. There's
I think you need to be prepared for that, of course.
This wasn't in yesterday's paper.
No, it'll be on Monday. We know that for sure. Well, this has been changed a little because we have too many words. I don't know. Ended up bringing it down, but
I saw the other day, I thought it was
within professional
Take us on a
development.
real quick guided tour again and show us what something
That is
that was very helpful. I thought that was
a teacher doesn't need to come back to me and say, oh, now I've been in the classroom 3 years, now I need to know physics, which I should know physics. No, physics is physics. If I teach you the physics, at any point in your that's the physics. But the methodology is a whole different
Ladies and gentlemen, if we could get your attention again and get everyone seated, we can begin.
Then all your questions come out.
All right, ladies.
Your personal meeting.
I don't want to know.
He's not a vice president. He didn't
Yeah,
want
I
you
know.
Mike, education.
That's the problem. People that work with me every day don't pay a bit of attention.
That'd be fine. Yeah, that's
Before I turn the meeting over to Rosemary Gold, many of you had the opportunity, unfortunately, to read the editorial that was in the newspaper last Tuesday, which was a reprint of an article in the Mountain Eagle, which is a weekly newspaper in Letcher County. And I have, through the help of Keith Capus and myself, we have written an official response under my signature, which will be in the newspaper on Monday. But I have placed up right behind Keith copies of it if you would like to have an advanced copy of what was said. It was very unfortunate. I can tell you that this is a very tempered piece. I wish you would have read my first draft. We talk about first drafts. I had some doozies and some words that we probably couldn't put for young children. But they are up there, and I just wanted to let you know because if time gets short, they are sitting there right there on that table in front. With that, Rosemary, will you please lead us?
If you'll bear with me just for a moment. Some of you have heard this. It'll take about a minute, but I think it's appropriate and fits at this time. For those of you who have heard it before, maybe there's something new that you can find from it. This is called fences. I wasn't good at kickball. And as a catcher, man, I was bad. The basketball eluded me, and as a runner, I was so sad. But there was one thing I was good at better than all the rest. When it came to climbing fences, by golly, I was the best. I'd hit a fence at 60, and I'd grab madly for the top and then push one leg over and then the next and sort of push away and drop. And landing on the other side with a soft but solid plop, I'd conquered one more fence. And for the moment, I could stop. Because fences, they're like mountains to a kid of 8 or 9. They're begging to be conquered, just waiting to be climbed. Now, grown-ups, they say that fences let you know where you should be. Like rules we have to live by, they just sort of keep things orderly. But when I was a kid, somehow I didn't know, and breaking all the rules and over all the fences I would go. And now that I'm grown up, it seems to me I find there are people building fences of a very different kind. But as long as folks build them, they build them high or they build them wide, I'm going to keep on climbing those fences. I need to know what's on the other side. And for every fence that's built, when all is done and said, I think I'll try for all my days to build a bridge instead. Back to Kathy's introduction. Bridge builders, educators as architects, and that is what we are. Those fences are the opportunities we provide, not only our students, ourselves, and our peers. And I believe what we are engaged in right now with these symposia, the conversations, the dialogue, the communications that we have established internally and externally, we're moving. And it is so very, very exciting. I wish for the moment that we would disregard the snapshot issues that we have, those that just focus on ourselves, our departments, and look at the big picture issues. There's a task we have at hand now. We have a meeting scheduled for May 5th, and by the way, Mike Seelig had asked me to mention that any members or any people who are here who are not members of the task force but have an interest, we want you to be a part of it. So please call Mike or send him an email and let him know if you have an interest to join the group, if you're not already a part of the whole group. The 5th is when we meet to develop the structure, for maybe the roadmap for where we hope to go. And it's really an exciting time. But back to Dr. Landenberg when he was first here. He said, in many instances when reform is being addressed, the right questions are not always being asked. And I'm not sure what I've posed on this sheet that I have passed down the rows are the right questions. But I do believe if you will take time after you leave our session today, over the weekend or sometime next week, to take a look at the 3 questions that are on the sheet and respond by listing what you perceive to be benefits and barriers. If you didn't receive one, I will see to it that you get some if you'll just email me and let me know. I ran off 50 and I'm not sure that's enough. The questions are these, and I guess I can give this to Tim to put on here. This is something I would like for you to take with you. Someone have one here that I can see. Thank you. The first one is, can we support a P16 concept? That's a pretty important question at this point. We might say, yes, I think we can support it, but there still are some problems that we have to address. There are barriers. There may be some for you that are different than they are for you, that are different than they are from you. We need to know what those are. What are those barriers? You know, we need to know, yes, do you think you can support this? And know that there will be barriers and that we will work together as a community of learners to overcome those barriers. So on that first sheet, if you would just take time to list the benefits that you see and the barriers that you see, it will be very helpful as we come back together on the 5th to work out a plan of action. The second question, will the total university community become involved? It's a very difficult question. I can't answer that personally right now, but together, pulling more people in on our task force even, together we can answer that. Again, what are the barriers? What needs to happen to ensure that that can work and that that will happen? We need your input. It's very important. And the third question is, if agreement is reached on 1 and 2, can we agree to endorse Morehead State University as a pace setter in the P16 movement? These things need to be answered before we can take the major steps we need to on down the road. In order for everyone to have an opportunity to respond, we felt like if we gave this to you, you had time to think about it, talk to your cohorts, your office workers in your office, the other people in your office, and then turn that back in. You don't have to put a name. It would just give us a lot of input and feedback for our May 5th meeting so that we can sit down and have a view of the whole university. So that is there for you to take a look at. At this point, Dr. Evelyn, with your permission, I think our speakers did a wonderful job. We're talking P16 concept. There are lots of questions I'm sure people may have about this. There may just be some conversations you wish to have today with the people who presented their work and what they're doing in their departments. I'd like to open the floor for any comments about the presentations or questions, concerns, anything that any of you would like to share with us.
West Maria, have we seen any signals yet that people in the public schools are also buying into this and that they will be willing to participate?
I think we've seen an increasing number of partnerships with local school districts through KEDC initiatives within the last couple of years. And I believe if funding sources were there, and that's usually how these partnerships come about, is with grant writing, I think that it could grow, to immeasurable limits.
There are several in this room who wrote with Bud Hardy, and I wish I could name everyone who did it, but I can't, who have written a P through 16 grant to really basically study that concept and to start the groups talking with one another. Not to say it's going to happen, but to just really get that process going. There have been 7 school districts that have signed on to that grant. What's interesting about those school districts is that all of them are really school districts that have large percentages of poverty within them. Of course, almost all of our service region does, but these even more specific. It's kind of an exciting grant. I've read through it when they brought it through. Also, I've talked with a few persons and organizations, companies, and got a $100,000 commitment from Ashland Inc. on this very issue that can be matched with another $100,000, which would go towards that educational leadership endowment. There's no doubt in my mind that if we really do, as a university, see this as something that we would like to do, I just think there's a lot of apples close to the ground that can be picked to try to get the money and the interest of the state to do it. But there's no guarantee. I'm sorry, Nancy, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say that I'm sure I'm not the only one who has these kinds of experiences. Doing the writing project, in the summer times I'm working with returning teachers for continued professional development and renewal and all of the kinds of things we've talked about. It seems to me, my impression is that with the teachers that come to the project, and granted they are self-selected in the sense that they apply and they interview and they compete for positions in this, and we give them a lot of things to come, that we want to treat them as nicely as we can in the summertime. So they often are a real self-selected kind of group. In my opinion, they're some of the best teachers we have. But they're tickled when I even mentioned that I would like to come to their schools and see if there's things that we can do together. And I've done some collaborative research project with 4th grade teachers and stuff, and I think they're waiting for us to decide when we're coming, because I think they're ready for that connection and that relationship. I think they crave it, and I think they realize that we need to learn what's happening there, but they would also like to show us what they're doing. And my experience has been that if we make those gestures, they're more than ready for those kinds of opportunities. I don't know if other people feel that way, but I certainly have felt that way.
Yes.
Rosemary, I just had an inquiry as to, on the task force, do we have undergraduate and graduate student representation? If not, I would suggest that we have.
Nothing keeps us from it.
I would suggest
the short answer is no, mainly because we just haven't done it. But I guess the more tempered
I think having
answer
their
is why
input
not?
We talked about having a student seminar. We did, or a symposium.
Yeah, there were some.
We did talk about that, And students were invited to all the seminars, and there was really a very poor showing from that
We
perspective.
have some students here today from music education.
Yeah.
Well, good.
I would highly recommend that we pursue at least a minimum of one undergrad and a graduate student to get some feedback from them as well, get their perceptions, and then them to realize that we are working on things.
There have been a couple of, not necessarily in the last two meetings, but there was an assistant superintendent who's been to every one of these, Ella Wells, and she's also the chair. I think there's some other folks out there that would be excellent to bring in, and I see a lot of heads nodding yes. I'll just assume the committee's watching this, that we don't have to make it an exclusive group. And by having it, by the way, that meeting is like from 5:30 to 8:30. The reason we did that, we're going to have a little lunch there, or I guess it'd be supper there, because that's a heavy day. We know that reading day. But that's why they went into the evening, so because there's University 101 training, there's special things going on. So it's going to be a long day, but this is an important topic.
Rita?
My concern has always been, because I started teaching back in the early 60s, is bandwagons and the immense amount of money that governments and people have put into policies over the years without thought. And one of the biggest criticisms that policy analysts have about all policies is that, first of all, the research isn't done carefully enough right at the beginning, that process evaluation plans aren't put in place, that as much money should be spent in evaluating a policy as putting the policy into place. And I just want to exercise a caveat here, that there is an overwhelming body of evidence around the world where in education people have leapt onto the latest theory as to what we might do better without thinking it through first and without putting an evaluation model in place. And good evaluation models normally cost as much money as the policy itself.
Good points. Thank you. Karen?
Last year, or last October, you all probably recall the panic that struck campus when the Teacher Ed Council / committee moved to increase the ACT score to 21. Not only did faculty in some cases have heart attacks on the spot, but many, many students came to see me as a result of that new move. And there was a statement earlier about having real tests. I think Nancy said something about having real tests. Maybe this relates to that issue, I'm not sure. Well, my question is, how do we move, and this is for all of us to think about, toward having higher standards? What do we need to do? What do we need to do in terms of recruiting? What do we need to do in terms of providing scholarships? What do we need to do in terms of test cutoff scores? What kinds of tests do we need to use in order to decide whether a person needs to go to, as Dora suggested, the Academic Wellness Center? What do we need to do in terms of evaluating and improving writing performance across the campus? Robert Royer and Marion Pollock have worked very diligently to design and redesign and evaluate our current writing sample project, and they're doing that primarily out of the hide of their own time. This is a lot of extra work on their part, no complaining from them at all, of course. What do we need to do in terms of...
You just don't hear it.
You just don't hear it, okay. In terms of critical thinking, what do we need to do to determine if our students who are going to be teachers really are critical thinkers? So there are a lot of questions that I have that I think we related to this higher performance level.
And I think, Karen, also, with our next meeting coming, evaluation at the level you're speaking of, as well as here at the university internally, will be two things that can be a focus of that discussion. We have a student who would like to share.
Yeah, on that, just before I make the comment, I'd like to say that I'm from Laurel County, southeastern Kentucky. I was 25th out of a graduating class of 250, and I came into this campus with I think it was 9 AP credits, so when I make the statement, don't assume that I'm saying it for myself. But it's my opinion that it's been the philosophy behind Morehead State University from its inception, as well as Kentucky Teachers College, what later became Eastern Kentucky University, UK and Center, that instead of just assuming the cream of the crop and taking that, putting it on a pedestal and saying, okay, look what's possible, to take from the mountain area, to make it better, to infuse it back into the education system of Eastern Kentucky, and that way create a new higher standard of excellence. But in order to do that, you have to take what you're given, and as teachers especially, you know that you have to not only, you can't be slashers. Way too many college professors are. You can't just take a classroom of 50 people, cut about half of them by giving them failing grades come midterm, and then only teaching to those that you deem worthy of your instruction later on. Teaching happens from the ground up. You have to teach to everybody, not just the select few. And unless you do, your voice stops with that few people. A comment was made a while back concerning our Department of Music Education. The people here at Morehead State, we had a person that was in that chair right behind Donna Everett that's probably in the nation's, if not in the continent's, top 5 instrumental performers here at this university. I didn't know the man until I got here. And now we are, to this community, what is probably, we are a light to the mountain, so to speak. We have here a voice that cannot be duplicated by anybody else, but on the same token, an opera singer by the name of Renee Fleming visited the university, and on top of calling our music ed department probably one of the better bachelor's programs in the United States, also said that we were probably the best well-kept secret of excellence. We have a voice to get out, but it cannot only go to those above level, it has to go to everybody before the message can be heard. And that's my comment.
Thank you very much.
Karen, if I might just react to Karen, thank you very much. I think you're speaking my language, and we'll find out what kind of job you want when you get done. Karen, I think there's another question, and please, English majors, I don't know how else to phrase it, but who is we? We have a lot of work to do. P through 16 makes we a much different statement, because I don't think we can solve everything that you've said, and even if we did, the only thing we do is make frustration bigger in that gap, in my opinion. To me, the we is bringing our other colleagues in, and that doesn't mean giving up intellectual, the type of intellectualism that we would like to see in terms of our graduates at the end. But every issue that you said, everyone sitting out there in P through 16 should understand. And that's what P through 16 means, simply from my viewpoint, is that it's all of our problems, all of our issues, and maybe we can get past the 10%. Maybe we can get to 25% we don't have to worry about, and then only have to worry about the other X percent. But right now, here at this institution, we have to worry about a large number, and it goes right with what you're saying. We can't make the fence so high that Eastern Kentuckians can't get into higher ed. And so we're in a real special place here. And I don't know the answer, but I do know we have to start defining we a little differently. We can't do it in isolation from the rest of the people.
There's a committee as part of the Teacher Ed Council that is, we're finally, at this point, calling it the Test Prep Committee. There's probably a better name for it. Dan Grace and Alvin Madengreiter had the idea that they need to link with the high schools and to have conversations with high schools in our service region in particular, maybe even beyond, to determine what kinds of connections and what kinds of reactions and responses and supports need to be in place to make that bridge. So part of the plan of the Test Prep Committee is to explore with everyone concerned with this issue.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, Kathy.
I think it's really serendipitous that a lot of people in this group are also members of a group of faculty and administrators who have been exploring a relationship with the Carnegie Teaching Academy over the last few months. And I would hope that a lot of you are thinking some of the same things that I'm thinking, that many of the issues that we've talked about here today are issues that are very relevant to our exploration of what does this university consider to be the scholarship of teaching. That's our goal right now. Is over the last few months we've been trying to define for our university what does it mean to explore the scholarship of teaching, and as we decide that, to move to the next step of what we hope will be a relationship with the Carnegie Teaching Academy, and that is to find a project that is unique and interesting and substantial to this university and our service region, that we might seek a relationship with the Carnegie Teaching Academy to be a long-term relationship. It just seems to me that these two issues work so well hand in hand. There are so many corollaries, and as I was listening to the student speak a moment ago, what he said addresses so much of what I believe to be true, that we do need to be an institution that accepts students from our region, but then we need to be serious about the development that it requires to bring those students to levels of excellence. And that's one of the areas that I worry about, is that we aren't very serious about our developmental programs. And I would like to see us become more serious about our developmental programs. But in doing that, I think what that requires is that we do some self-examination about how much do we really know about the learning process and pedagogy that really addresses in a practical way the learning process. Most of us in this room, or most of us across campus who teach, have probably never been exposed to the kinds of information that we hope our public school teachers are exposed to. And that is a lot of what Kathy put on the screen a little bit ago, that we understand something about the way people learn. Most of us have come through discipline-specific graduate programs with little pedagogical preparation. And so as we think about these issues, I think we ought to think about what, maybe you could answer in my question. The question would be, does anyone else see the possibility of the Carnegie Teaching Academy effort working hand in hand with this effort, and the possibility of our project being, let's look at ourselves in terms of making ourselves more scholarly teachers?
We discussed that. We discussed that, by the way, on the discussion list that Wayne started. That and Edna mentioned that we actually have three things going on at this institution. This symposium, Wayne's discussion list, the Carnegie Forum, as well as the Math and Science Teaching Improvement Initiative, and we're all talking about the same thing. I mean, as I mentioned on the meeting, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, we could probably save 1 or 2 meetings if we combine our efforts.
We all talking about the same thing. So there's the Columbia Group, the Bell South Grant, and several other very large grants that are discussing the same thing
also.
And have already come up with a list of things that need to be done.
We'll have to network that communication in a better way then, fine-tune it. Dora? Thank you, Edna.
I'd just like to say a word on the Academic Wellness Center, which apparently sounds funny, but it really is not intended to be. I think it's actually a real need, and it goes on to what the student pointed out. Many of our students do not come to us ready to take the classes we want to teach them. I found that out very well when I taught one summer a class for elementary teachers. It was one of the basic math classes. And I knew that some of my students in that class just were not going to be able to make it through the class because they just did not have the background necessary to make it. And this is what this Academic Wellness Center is out to serve. It's out to serve that student who comes to us and is not ready and we cannot help them in the classroom setting. They need a one-to-one help. We need someone who will be trained to identify the weaknesses and will be able to develop a plan, just like when you go to your wellness center and they develop a plan for you so that you can get into a better shape. Then they can have a plan that would help them prepare for the classes that they do need to take. And I believe that if we look for grant funding money, the money will be there to establish as a center.
Another thing that we might add at this point is when we're talking P16, that student who comes to us not as prepared perhaps as we would like, if in fact we're P16 and there's a smooth transition of learning from beginning all the way to 16, those kinds of gaps might be helped along the way before they get here if we're working closely with the local districts.
That is
in
true,
way.
but it will take a long time for that to happen.
Oh, I'm sure,
So
but
for now, you have to work with what you got.
I understand what you're saying. Thank you. Yes.
I would suggest that when we're talking about P through 16, and I think Morehead State University already does this, it translates to some students as P18 or P20. In other words, they come to us, we identify their wellness plan, but not all people will finish in 4 years. Some are here 5 or 6 years. And so I applaud the student that goes across and receives their diploma who's been here 6 or 6.5 years as much as I do the one that's been able to accomplish it in 4. And I think if we're going to be a regional university in a real world, that's what we have to tune into.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay. Just for the sake of saying it, my name is Jason Robbins. For the sake of no longer being referred to as the student. And for the, just for the heck of saying it, those of us in the music department have accepted the fact that we're probably going to be there for well into 5 and 6 years. And the reason behind that is I've been listening to the conflicts with professional development among the different departments here that come into this collective education department, whatever you want to call it, in music ed. And I'm speaking not as an example, but rather as an individual in a collective average. This is my 3rd year here, and I'm a senior. I have yet to take in under 19 hours as being a member here because I have been in the Department of Music. And for those that would argue about the well-roundedness of anybody in a specialist field, I'm a music education major instrumentalist. I've just recently declared a double major for vocal certification. For any of you familiar with the department lingo, both here and Eastern, what I'm doing at Eastern would be a triple major in K-12 education and in music performance, vocal performance instrumental. This department I have to applaud because it has to be, okay, when you come to Morehead State, you're a music performance and a music education major. At least that's how it would translate in any other college in the state. And while I'm just wondering, if I'm the average in this instance, and I am, I guarantee you, what's going on with the rest of the departments? And let me finish out what I'm saying. I take an average of 21 to 22 hours a semester. I came here with 6 AP credits. I'm in 2 honors fraternities. I helped to recharter a business education society, Phi Beta Lambda here, who had just evaporated for a couple of years before I got back on campus. I'm a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians. I have teacher certification in that field because of my membership. And my question is, being where I've been in that little neck of the woods, and also through that, the rest of this campus, my question is, what is the difference, well, a question and a comment, what is the difference between professional development along the lines, and another thing is, if there is a difference, why are people not focusing on the strengths of the department and helping to upgrade them rather than ignoring them and slightly see those decline, as I have over recent years?
Anyone care to comment?
I think I would like to comment to it. I think I'm going to try to paraphrase what you said in another way. I think all students perceive that the area that they choose to major is different from other majors. And I've even seen faculty say, well, if they had the standards we had, we wouldn't have this problem. Now, I can tell you this, that happens in every department I walk into, all 22 of them. I mean, all of them think that they are doing more than the others. I think what you fall into is this 10% that can really perform anywhere, any place, probably. But the part of your question that I really was really identified with is that how do we get on a program of continual renewal as departments? I think that's really what you were saying. What can we do ourselves to constantly improve and therefore expect more and get more from those students who come to us? Now, that may not be what you said. It's a very good question. I don't have an answer, and I don't even know if it's true, but I think that's what you said.
Can I just comment on a study that I did last summer in relation
I
to
think
the
you
amount
will.
of hours
You made it an interrogative. What if I said no?
I did a study last summer of how many hours students worked in this university, and also I looked at a lot of demographics as well. I think in relation to the comment that you've just made about the 22 hours, and Wayne's astute comment in relation to the amount of time that people actually study outside of our foundation's course. In fact, some students work an astonishing number of hours. All of us know that we have students out there working sometimes 40 hours a week. That this has become, I think, possibly an increasing problem here, that students do believe that they can work full-time and do a degree full-time. It's not actually possible, not if they're going to study the way that we would like them to study. So if we're going to have higher fees, if we're going to set the financial accessibility to a higher level, we are going to run into an increasing difficulty in relation to students believing that they need to work full-time and study full-time and sleep 3 hours a night. And Wayne, I know that we have both experienced students who I have students who come to my classes and they actually fall asleep. Not because I'm boring. Not because I'm boring.
I can't see anyone sleeping in your class.
No, Dan.
I think this is a little related, but perhaps not, and I feel like it would be remiss if I didn't read an email from one of my colleagues in my department. And I imagine that some of you will identify with this. This tends to be a kind of preaching to the choir kind of gathering. But I would like to read an email from one of my colleagues who isn't here today, has other obligations, but is a little skeptical also about this particular kind of process, but for some very different reasons. This person says, I really appreciate your sending out that call for faculty responses regarding teacher education reform. Some of you got that. Hopefully your chairs forwarded it to you. Actually, the very fact that you and Rob, as methods people or pedagogy people or whatever you want to call us, have been tapped to, quote, channel faculty views reflects a pattern I've long observed and found rather disturbing. It seems that people outside of higher ed assume that the faculty on campus that they should be talking to are either in the School of Education itself or the individuals within various academic departments outside the School of Education who are identified as particularly allied somehow to the School of Education and invested in methods course more so than content courses. One of the big rifts in higher ed is between people in many traditional academic disciplines and people in these very groups. I worry that the people ultimately be making decisions about the future of higher ed and teacher education will never hear what the bulk of faculty have to say. Is there some way to provide for a better representation of the range of views among faculty in all the disciplines across the university? That's this query, but it was clear when Dr. Langenberg spoke about education reform in Maryland that they too were looking to the pedagogy people and the English ed people as legitimate spokespersons for English studies, for example. I have no problem with the major involvement of these experts, of course, but I feel very much disenfranchised. Since a big concern is that teachers are not prepared in the subjects they are to teach and the call is for greater emphasis on content, perhaps they should be pulling more people who are teaching those content courses into the discussion at all levels. Could you sound others out on this point and suggest that the discussions need to be more inclusive? And I imagine you have people in your departments who feel this very way, so.
Thank you. I had a thought, and when it comes back, I'll share it, but I lost it right after I had it. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just say that that same disenfranchisement, often those of us in teacher ed feel too. Not from the content period, but from the state and the State Department and all these people who are involved in education. We feel like we're left out of the loop too. And I remember a few years ago, I had a conversation with a historian who was complaining that my department was leaving him and his department out of the reforms that we were doing, and I felt like I was just as in the dark as he was. He imagined that we were in the loop, and we weren't. And I mean, I certainly appreciate the point, and I think it's a legitimate one that we need to be concerned about.
And I don't think I don't think this person's alone.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure.
I think there are other people in many departments like this who may, in fact, not even be participating in the symposium because they don't feel like this is really the place where the real issues are going to get addressed, because we're all, you know, as I said, preaching to the choir about these issues.
Any other comments? Shreya?
Well, we'll go without saying, just two remarks, short ones. First of all, in the last 5 years, I went back and looked at the teacher preparation number of teachers that we have produced or graduated. We have reduced our number by 200 a year over the past 5 years. So I guess I have a question of saying, are we proud that we have reduced the numbers, or do we need to look at what we're doing to prepare ourselves to better work with students so they have the opportunity to become teachers? And the other thing, Nancy, I guess I would say, I think Dr. Eaglin has opened the opportunity for all of us. So if we don't participate, we need to look in the mirror at ourselves. That's all I'm saying.
Edna?
I
One
think
comment, then up
Wayne's
here.
email, we call it Wayne's email.
Wayne's World, you guys,
Wayne's World. Illustrates how that tool can really solve one of the problems. It started out with the NCATE list, but I know other people have been added to it along the way. And there's no reason why the entire faculty can't be added to it, except that we have to press the button so many times to get But anytime we have a task force that's being formed, it ought to get out on email. Because I think there are grants that are written, like this P16 grant that Dean Hardy's doing. I had never heard of it. I have a concept idea for a P16 thing that I maybe could work in with that.
Well, it's Mike's invitation there also,
Oh, yeah,
a while ago.
I realize
There
the
may be
invitation
people out
is
there who
there.
need to come on in, and we should encourage them.
But Rosemary, I think initially the invitation went out to 40 faculty and I guess certain staff, but like, for instance, the readings, if a staff member is interested in the whole conversation, they're not privy to the readings, they really don't know what is going on. So, I mean, they need to have the readings in order to even be cognizant of what the issues are. And I don't think we are.
Thank you.
I hate to do this, but it's 5 o'clock, and I said that I would be cut off by. This is not the end, folks. It's really the beginning. I would hope really for you to think about this P through 16 concept. The reason it does fascinate me is exactly what we were hearing from your colleagues. This is not to be a group that's so well defined. I really personally would like to see it opened up. But also, you know, having been an academic vice president for 11 years and a president for 15 years, we can talk things to death. I believe that you have to have movement. One of the biggest criticisms of us is that we talk things to death, and we can always try to make it perfect. You know, go to a University 101 class, and you learn that, you know, you first shot at something, you might get 50% of the variance, and then you do something else, and you get it to 75%. It's your rough draft notion. But you never get to 100%, and sometimes I think collectively we want to get to 100%, and I don't think that's realistic in this. I think some things have to be on faith, some things we have to get in. Yes, we learn about it, we can change, it's dynamic, it's always moving. I am going to, at least administratively, speak to the dean to have it come from another direction so that others can at least get engaged in the ability to do a little bit of a force field analysis, if you will, of is this a good idea or is it not a good idea. I'll give you my word, I am not going to push anything personally. This has to be something that really comes from you, or it won't work. It's as simple as that. But I do think we need a skeleton from which to work, to put some flesh on and make some movement, or else this will be another exercise of frustration for all of us. One of the persons said, and I can't remember which side they came down on. I think it was the content versus methodology. It's probably a bad way to end this, but they said very clearly that I would much rather have somebody who knows what they're doing and do it badly than someone who doesn't know what they're doing and do it very well. I think somebody said that in one of our. I'm not smart enough to make that up, but you know, I think we all know what we're doing, and collectively, I think it can become very good. Now, I asked John Will to come here because we need money. And we need the attention. I can tell you right now, we have the attention of Cody and Davies. And if you send me with a loud, clear message, not even knowing what the end result will be, because that's what you want is planning money to find out, to have these debates, to bring these folks in, to see if we truly can cooperate with our colleagues at another level. I don't know if we can or we can't. But if we can, I mean, because we have trouble sometimes getting along with between departments. No. And you know, to open this up and say we can all become one big happy family, I don't know. We might be creating another Round County war. I don't know. But if we have the attitude, and we can go into this in such a way to see if it can work, I think we can really draw in some allies, and I think we can get money. And I think we can address some of these very important issues that you raised. Because if all of a sudden, and all these questions that you gave, Karen, if these are starting to be addressed in two different levels, that takes time, and that takes effort, and it may take more people. Because it might mean your involvement equally as important with their involvement to make that happen. That means both systems need more money to make it happen. But if the end results is getting away from the 10% and moving to 20%, I'll make one last comment and I will hush. Many of you know I don't mix words. It gets me in trouble a lot, especially in front of the Senate. I say what's on my mind, and I try to say why and give reasons for it, and then let the chips